Muy buenos días. Es un placer poder tener la oportunidad de estar de nuevo en este foro tan interesante. Para las personas que estuvieron ayer, creo que coinciden conmigo en que tuvimos exposiciones de sumo interés para el trabajo que estamos realizando. Y para las personas que nos integran hoy, pues quisiéramos hacerle un pequeño resumen de lo que hablamos y de lo que de manera muy general puedo transmitirles en estos poquitos minutos. El día de ayer tuvimos una sesión con exposiciones e intervenciones, como digo, muy interesantes, que nos permitieron conocer y apreciar diversos aspectos y enfoques relacionados con el proceso de implementación y seguimiento de la Agenda 2030 en Costa Rica y experiencias que nos han compartido desde el entorno regional e internacional. En una primera sesión, el Ministerio de Planificación nos entregó un panorama general del proceso seguido por el país, donde se destaca el compromiso asumido por los diferentes sectores, liderado por el gobierno, tanto en el ámbito nacional, un compromiso que trasciende tanto el ámbito nacional como en el internacional, desde un enfoque integrador al que se han sumado la empresa privada, la sociedad civil, los diferentes poderes de la República. Se destaca como reflejo de ese esfuerzo la presentación del primer informe voluntario ante Naciones Unidas sobre el avance en la implementación de la agenda, informe que muestra sobre todo ese esfuerzo organizativo, la construcción de insumos que ha hecho el país para ir delineando la agenda país. Esta intervención fue complementada con la visión de las representantes de la empresa privada y la sociedad civil, que con gran transparencia nos compartieron el trabajo llevado a cabo desde sus sectores, y más importante aún, las enseñanzas y el aprendizaje, todo el aprendizaje obtenido en este proceso, donde más de 200 empresas y gran cantidad de entidades de la organización de la sociedad civil participaron en procesos de sensibilización alrededor de la Agenda 2030 y buscando y encontrando su propio camino para contribuir al establecimiento de la meta país, su seguimiento y el logro de nuestros objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, a la vez que interactúan en espacios de discusión con el Estado, desde el Comité Consultivo, con aportes concretos y planteamientos retadores y desafiantes para el Estado. La CEPAL aportó su visión regional desde el proceso de los ODS, destacando las posibilidades y los desafíos que se plantean. Precisamente mencionaron ese involucramiento y participación de la empresa privada y la sociedad civil, que ha enriquecido sumamente todo este proceso. Vimos cómo los países establecen sus propias prioridades, con coincidencias en temas importantes como pobreza, desigualdad, consumo y producción sostenible, coincidencias que toca considerar entonces desde el trabajo de la región, junto al apoyo que siempre da la CEPAL, el apoyo técnico para el desarrollo de capacidades de los sistemas estadísticos nacionales, ahora con una visión integradora de los diversos sectores. En otra sesión coincidimos sobre la disponibilidad de datos en Costa Rica, conocimos sobre la disponibilidad de datos en Costa Rica para poder construir los indicadores ODS, sobre las actividades que se están llevando a cabo para consolidar un sistema de datos con importantes retos, pero asumidos con compromiso y con una gran visión de la oportunidad que nos brinda este proceso para el fortalecimiento del sistema estadístico nacional. Se conocieron por medio de la gerente del INEC las gestiones que el INEC realiza para modernizar la institución, mejorar su marco legal, los procesos de producción estadística, el desafío de esa programación de 10 años que contribuirá sin duda a mejorar la coordinación estadística del sistema estadístico, fortalecer el liderazgo del INEC y fortalecer la producción y entrega de información con mucho mayor calidad y producida de manera más eficiente. Importantes ejemplos también nos brindó Colombia de cómo innovar en la generación de los indicadores ODS metodológicamente. La CEPAL nos mostró la bondad de los sistemas de información geográfica para la generación de información, la importancia de armonizar la cartografía y compartir la información creada por las diferentes instituciones. Hablamos sobre los países que han avanzado en sus hojas de ruta. En esta sesión se habló sobre las posibilidades que dan la construcción de hojas de ruta para los datos de desarrollo sostenible. El señor Aditya nos comentó sobre la importante labor de la Alianza Global para los Datos de Desarrollo Sostenible, de cómo han apoyado a los países en fortalecer su capacidad de generar datos, cómo aprovechar las nuevas tecnologías para generar información de importancia para monitorear el desarrollo ambiental, por ejemplo. Igualmente, México, Ecuador y Ghana nos mostraron experiencias diversas y muy valiosos ejemplos que nos ilustraron sobre cómo poder hacer las cosas para orientar mejor nuestros esfuerzos. El sistema de indicadores desarrollado por el DANA de Colombia es un buen ejemplo de eso. El proceso político y técnico del cual nos comentó Ghana, nos lanzó ideas muy interesantes. También aprendimos mucho sobre los ejemplos de planificación que realiza el INEC de Ecuador, los instrumentos de planificación que está elaborando, y sobre la forma clara y concisa con que México ha decidido trazar su marco nacional de indicadores con una amplia consulta interministerial. Todas estas son experiencias que estoy seguro serán muy aprovechadas por todos nosotros. Finalmente cerramos con una sesión de suma importancia en la que se puso sobre la mesa el cómo enfrentar las desigualdades, las inequidades en el proceso de desarrollo, cómo incorporar el no dejar a nadie atrás. Interesante reflexión sobre la importancia de una agenda política clara sobre la cual se enfoquen los esfuerzos de la producción de datos. Hoy continuamos con este foro y seguro que será tan interesante como el día de ayer y tal vez más todavía, así que los invitamos a participar muy activamente, intervengan con sus preguntas, todo eso enriquece la discusión y el aporte. Aprovechemos a nuestros panelistas, muchos de los cuales pues vienen de bastante lejos, así que tenemos que sacarle todo el jugo posible a sus presentaciones. Igual les pedimos una gran colaboración en el trabajo de grupo, en el trabajo conjunto que vamos a realizar el día de hoy para poder recoger esos insumos que para nosotros son fundamentales y poder orientar adecuadamente la construcción de nuestra hoja de ruta. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, doña María Elena. Ahora pasamos a la primera sesión del día, donde hablaremos sobre el potencial de la administración de datos. Nos acompaña Maciej Truszyński, de la Oficina de Estadística de Dinamarca, quien nos expondrá sobre la producción de estadísticas basadas en datos administrativos y los principales usos y beneficios de los datos administrativos. Maciej Truszyński ha trabajado durante más de 10 años en el campo de las estadísticas, primero en la producción de estadísticas de finanzas del gobierno, luego en la oficina de gestión, donde sus responsabilidades eran la negociación de la legislación estadística europea, nada más y nada menos. Desde 2015 ha estado muy involucrado con trabajos sobre los ODS, es el coordinador nacional de trabajo estadístico sobre los ODS. Las tres áreas le han dado un amplio conocimiento sobre el uso de datos administrativos en estadística, tanto desde el punto de vista práctico y legislativo como teórico. Entonces le dejo el podio a don Maciej Truszyński.
Am I on? Hello? Okay, thank you. Thank you. It's a great honor to be here, both for Statistics Denmark and for me personally. I need my notes. I'm an older guy, so I have to read something I cannot memorize. And this goes for hearing aid. I have it here. You can just ask questions in Spanish. And I think we take questions after the presentation so that I have fluency. So, as you know, my presentation will be about administrative data. The first part will be our view of why this is a good way forward, and the second part will concentrate on some examples of how we use administrative data in Statistics Denmark. And what came to my mind yesterday is some of the things I'm going to mention today were already mentioned yesterday, so we are basically on the same page regarding some considerations on how to address the challenge posed by 2030 agenda. Sorry, how do I change the slides? Before I proceed with this essence of my presentation, I would like to put it into some background. The trust that has been given to statistical community by adoption of 2030 agenda is both a huge challenge and a huge opportunity. I will start with the challenges and then continue with opportunities. The first challenge is that agenda is vast and the requirements for data are equally vast. Then what we are expected to is to deliver that data that are as comparable as possible across the countries. Yet, the issue is that we have different starting points in statistical capacity. The data revolution keeps unfolding, and the data required and the opportunities for data collection keep expanding. At the same time, obtaining access to and using data requires joint approaches by both data owners and data producers. The specific feature of the agenda is leaving no one behind. And leaving no one behind requires the data granular in order to capture how implementation affects everyone, particularly the most vulnerable. Is it disturbing, this echo? Should I change? Should I change to, sorry, should I go up here or? Okay. Sorry for I'm back on track. Then I was mentioning the requirements of leaving no one behind. The next issue is that the statistical offices face financial constraints, and there is no ease on the horizon in order to address the data requirements. This was the short view of the challenge part, but the opportunity part is that Agenda 2030 gives us the possibility to boost statistical capacity in individual countries. And this goes not least for capacity to exploit different data sources. And in Statistics Denmark, we argue that administrative data is one of the sources to be exploited further. In our humble opinion, if we could use 2030 agenda to engineer a greater use of admin data in production of statistics, this could be one of the long-lasting legacies of the agenda. Furthermore, which even more important, in our opinion, admin data can kill two birds with one stone. On the one hand, it can address the data needs posed by the 2030 agenda. On the other hand, it can be an important factor to improve national statistical capacity. We may not forget the world outside the SDGs and the role we are playing. There is statistics beside SDGs, and we hope that admin data can address those needs. Before I proceed, I think it's necessary to specify what I mean by administrative data. Administrative data are data collected by public authorities for administrative purposes. This means they have different legal mandate than producing statistics. And the administrative data can be tax registers, health registers, unemployment registers. Clearly, the main purpose of those registers is to support administrative processes. And statistics produced on this data is only a byproduct of having established the registers for different purposes. Where do we see the advantages? The first one, which we truly believe is important, is that administrative registers are created in order to address the national demand. So the administrative registers ensure national ownership of the process. Then they are, of course, cheap. In Statistics Denmark, they're cheap. The data are collected anyhow for administrative purposes, and then it's only about to use the data for statistics. To give you an example, we do not longer have census in Statistics Denmark. We just use the data from the registers and produce censuses on a quarterly and yearly basis. And to give you an example of number of involved employees in censuses worldwide, you have 10 million in China, 500,000 in USA, and 2 persons working with this in Denmark. And we updated it. It is being updated daily. We just don't produce daily data on population. Thirdly, the administrative data provide in principle total coverage, which means they give more detailed statistics that can be produced by using sample surveys. For instance, statistics for small areas or very detailed population segments. And this goes hand in hand with the requirement of leaving no one behind. Thanks to the continuity and comparability of administrative registers, the statistics based on those is a fantastic source of research and evidence-based and evidence for the decision-making. In Statistics Denmark, one of our main tasks, as we see it, is to give researchers and ministries access to data, of course in a way that does not allow for identification. And finally, sometimes overlooked dimension is that admin data gives you a geospatial dimension. But by seeing the registers, you know where person or enterprise or other aspect is coming from. This is again crucial in leaving no one behind. So what is the framework enabling wider use of admin data and statistics? Let me discuss a few features. The first one is, of course, the political courage to determine that this is the way we want to go. And then subsequently, appropriate legislation is necessary. And legislation should allow for the reuse of administrative data for statistics and should give the right to statistical offices to receive such data free of charge. It is also very helpful if statistical offices are heard when the legislation is made. And there is, of course, always a risk that legislation or administrative practices in some specific areas can change. The statistical use of such data can become a hostage to such changes, which undermines the whole process of continuity and comparability. This is why this is important to make a statistical case in shaping the registers. Nevertheless, accidents still can happen, and Statistics Denmark access to health registers is now strongly limited because of newly adopted act. So we have ongoing discussions with Ministry of Health and the institution responsible for data there. Then, system of unique identifiers. This is very helpful in linking data, but as we see it, it's not strictly necessary condition. Without unique identifiers, some statistics can be based on standalone registers, such as education, population, or unemployment. And then cooperation among administrative authorities. We all know that having a legal mandate can be a necessary condition for obtaining what you want. Nevertheless, there can be countless practical hindrances unless there is a spirit of cooperation and goodwill. And this is not just about obtaining data. There will often be questions of practical nature and interpretation that will need to be answered. And cooperation between institutions to a certain degree might depend on the political will and support. This leads me to a slightly deeper level, which is public approval. Different countries have different trust in governments and in public authorities. And of course, it helps if the level of trust to public authorities is high. Nevertheless, this can be counterbalanced by making sure that statistical authorities are capable of being very protective towards the confidential information in the statistical registers or in the registers. And last but not least, something that is perceived as precondition, which we do not perceive as such. This is the level of IT sophistication. The system in Denmark was created in the 70s, and then the huge mainframe computers had less computing power than our mobile phones. And this was also before the internet. Going to the risks. There is always a temptation for public authorities to use statistical data for administrative purposes. We have to be very clear from the beginning that data may not be provided for other purposes than statistical. Then there's also risk with security glitches, which are very important as they undermine the whole business model, which means that they could undermine the trust that statistical institution is able to control the confidential data. And finally, changes in administrative procedures that I referred to before are also perceived as one of the risks. This will interrupt the continuity and comparability of data. This is why, again, we think that communication between the public authorities and statistical institutions is very important, so that statistics can have a say in shaping the registers. We believe, though, that these risks can be managed and the advantages clearly outdo the costs. About being a little more practical, how do we start or continue working? The first one is, of course, a legal and institutional framework established. And then it is necessary to establish understanding and capacity. And of course, advocacy work is needed in this aspect. Then it would make sense to start with statistics based on some single individual registers that do not involve any linking across the registers. This step can be gradually expanded, leading to next step, which is linking data across different registers. This, of course, requires unique identifier. But nevertheless, other ways, more fragile ways of linking the registers are a possibility. And this concludes the theoretical part of my presentation. Now I will move to I will move to give you some examples of how to use it in Denmark and also draw some parallels to what I have said in this theoretical part. So the register-based system in Denmark is divided among many registers that on the one side can be perceived as standalone registers, but on the other as a part of a bigger system. The cornerstones are the existence of base registers that keep track of target population and the fact that all major registers can be interlinked. And the three registers you can see are the three base registers. This is personal register, enterprise register, and building and housing registers. It is necessary that objects in the registers are well defined and used in the same way in all data and statistics. It is also important that for statistics that all authorities providing input to those registers agree and use same basic registrations. Now, it has been discussed in Denmark who should control the registers. Should it be statistical institution or public authorities? And the decision was that there are three public authorities controlling each of those registers. The rationale behind it was to minimize possibility of using statistics for administrative purposes. Statistics Denmark was deeply involved in shaping those registers. And our advice was heard, likely. But on the other side, what is of benefit to statistics is also of benefit for administrative use. And then the question that you probably have is would I say those registers are statistical registers? No. Statistical registers are shadows of those registers enriched with some statistical data, which means we have three large registers corresponding to those here. And in order to show you the complexity of the system, I will show you this. First, I will elaborate a little more about personal register. But thanks to unique identifiers, we can link data across the system and basically tell pretty much everything about each person in Denmark. Oh, sorry. Being a little more practical, how it works, it is that data is received from register owners. Data is received to Statistics Denmark when it undergoes some editing. There, depending on agreement between Statistics Denmark and data provider, the editing and preliminary error finding can find place in Statistics Denmark or at the data provider. Then we made agreement that they check for outliers and different things so that the data we are receiving are more or less ready to be put into statistics. And then when data are transmitted to Statistics Denmark, they are set in a uniform system and then can be combined in order to create new registers. For example, can different data at person level be validated and then combined in order to establish new registers, such as crime education, health education, crime and wealth. You can easily track the different aspects of a person. Let me go to, I wouldn't say flagship of our registers because then people in business statistics would get upset. But this is one of the biggest registers we have. This is Central Population Register. And the general purpose is, of course, to show the population, its size, composition changes such as birth, deaths, and other aspects. This is divided into two kinds of information. Stock information, which is something that is not changed, like birth date, your sex, your parents, and flow information, which could be address, marital status, citizenship. This register has something called central personal number. Every person in Denmark has attached this number, or has this number attached, and this is basically not possible to live in Denmark without having this number, which makes this data of very high quality. What are the strengths and what are the weaknesses of this system? The strength is, of course, it covers total population. There are some persons that we are not covering in this register. This is marginal. I don't even know the percentage, but this is very, very small. It's timely, it allows for longitudinal data, and it's cheap. The weaknesses is that it only covers data available in administrative registers. Like it doesn't say anything about language, ethnicity, religion. And this brings me to one of the points taken up yesterday, which is data disaggregation. This is seen from my perspective as a person working in National Statistical Institute. I fully, support and understand the requirement for data disaggregation from various stakeholders. However, we have to be aware that there are some differences in legislation across the countries. So unless we make advocacy for politicians to change the law, statistical institutes cannot proceed. In Denmark, it is, for example, not allowed to ask about the religion. Thanks to the registers, you can backtrack the religious affiliation of a person. If immigrant is coming from Middle East and his or her parents are from Middle East, there is a good chance he will be a Muslim. But this is nothing to be 100% sure of. And then the other thing is, I will also draw attention to, is data on disabilities. This is also a challenge. We don't, in our case, there is no clear definition in Denmark what disability is. There is a working group under UN working on this, but as I know it, there is no clear definition on disability, which makes it difficult to capture, because is person wearing glasses, is it the same type of disability as person having something much more severe or not? What we can do, we can see in different registers whether a person receives disability benefits, but still this is not covering enough of the population so that we can blindly trust this register. This was just minor comment in our plea for disaggregation. Please help us in advocacy for the politicians that the situation is not that simple. I often personally, when I receive a request for data from different UN agencies, 20 pages of questions, and then I ask, how do you even imagine we have capacity of doing this? The answer is, this was adopted by the politicians at the UN level. And this is good, but it doesn't bring me further. Then I will give you two short examples of VAT data that we use in Statistics Denmark. We use VAT data as primary source and as secondary source. And the Danish tax authorities are one of, if not the biggest partner of Statistics Denmark. We receive data on a daily basis, which allows us to provide statistics of total turnover, exports, and input to quarterly national accounts. The interesting thing here, which also relates partly to personal data of the central personal register, is that the data to be most trusted are the data from the activities that are subject to inspection of tax authorities. Then the data is very good, because enterprises know if they do not provide good data, they will get a fine, and no one is interested in the fine. The data that are not subject to inspections, they are of much lower quality, and then we have to upweight how to address this discrepancy. As supplementary source, we use data in replacing survey data. There is always a huge issue of response burden in Denmark. And we are always known of shouting response burden. We have to protect the data providers or the institutions. Then we use it in imputations and in error detection. And here, one of the also ongoing themes in this discussion is communication with other authorities. Even though the system seems to be working in Denmark, it was decided that we made a formal agreement with data providers on data transmissions, which means the agreement is a paper of 2 pages. We specify what kind of variables are to be delivered to Denmark, to Statistics Denmark, with what frequency, in what format, and which is probably most important, we have contact persons for both Statistics Denmark and the institution providing the data, so that we in any time can take contact and discuss what's happening. Furthermore, we want the institution to inform us whether they expect changes in administrative registers. So first, so that we can react and talk to politicians about how do we see it, and then we can adapt our systems. Oh, sorry. Now, maybe I'm soon finishing. So the preconditions for a useful register are on the paper very simple. We need agreement of what we measure, where does unit belong to, how is it registered, and what is the coverage. With this, we can shaping statistical registers. And finally, some points for consideration that could be left to you. Thank you. Yes, do you have any questions? And I will take my hearing aid. Oh, sure. No. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for that fascinating presentation. I was quite captivated by the slide where you are comparing the costs of conducting the census in China, the US, and then Denmark. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering what kind of investment in terms of financial, technical, human was put in to get to a point where you can only use 2 people. Because the capital investment to get to that point may be what will be the challenge for many developing countries, to invest in administrative systems that get to the point where you don't need to conduct a census. And many would then opt to do the census after every 10 years as it is, because it's such an expensive exercise. But the cost of building that system compared to 10 years spreading out may be what's more appealing to countries.
Oh, well, thank you. This is first historical question. My ability to answer it is limited. We started working with Central Personal Register in '68, and then we gradually expanded. What I should have said in my presentation, it took us 50 years to get where we are now. And the reason for this is that we started working with Central Personal Register in 1968, and then we gradually expanded. What I should have said in my presentation, it took us 50 years to get where we are now. And the reason for this is that we started working with Central Personal Register in 1968, and then we gradually expanded. What I should have said in my presentation, it took us 50 years to get where we are now. And the reason for this is that we started working with Central Personal Register in 1968, and then we gradually expanded. Nevertheless, it doesn't mean that it will take 50 years for other countries, because you can build on our experiences, on other experiences, and then the system is more in place. Getting back to 10-year census, this is my personal concern. Now I'm not Statistics Denmark. When we look at 2030 agenda and the censuses, and we know many indicators have the denominator of population, like poverty, health, education. It's always divided by population. And then we have census in 2020. So this leaves us basically with one firm population number for a society. Whether it's enough, I will leave it up to you. But again, Agenda 2030 is a fantastic initiative, but we have to keep in mind that we have and we will produce data in order to ensure evidence-based decision-making of our politicians. And with census conducted every 10 years, we will have difficulties in capturing the idea of leaving no one behind and other issues. So this is the bottom line is it should take shorter time for the others than for us. Spanish or?
Pero tal vez pregunto en español. I'm going to do it in Spanish. Mencionabas que pues Estadística Dinamarca tiene una fuerte capacidad de investigación. Quería saber de pronto cómo trabajan con las otras agencias del gobierno para crear en ellos esa conciencia de la importancia de mantener los registros con una buena calidad, de modo que uno, pues sean útiles para ellos, pero en este caso pues el tema que nos trae en la generación de información estadística. Lo pregunto porque, digamos, en el caso de Colombia no es tan fácil hacer entender a las entidades la importancia que puede tener esta información y el potencial de uso que tiene, y lo que hemos intentado hacer, pero no ha sido muy fácil, es trabajar con ellos para generar, por ejemplo, investigación a partir de los registros. No sé si nos podrías contar un poco más de eso. Gracias. Was it clear?
Well, I hope I can. Let me just turn it off. Well, first, the registers are there for administrative purposes, so we just take the data. If the purpose of the register changes, the register will be changed, and then it's up to us to discuss and convince the public, the ministry involved, that they also have to take account of our data. Oh, sorry, of statistical needs. And there is an understanding in a society across the ministries, to some extent, of course, this is not perfect, that this makes sense to collaborate. Whether it gives, the collaboration is crucial. We talk, and we are always proactive in addressing our needs and talking and discussing to people. If there is no goodwill, I assure you can follow, this could be difficult. What happened, and on the flip side, the ministries, they're also benefiting from the data, because if the ministry of a government puts an initiative on table, then they want to follow up. And if they cannot follow up because of a lack of the data, and they go to us with criticizing us, we will always point back to the ministry. I say, sorry. And what I liked in Omar's presentation yesterday was partnership discussion. This is side comment to work on SDGs. What we have created is partnership for SDG data, where we basically have invited the whole Denmark, all the ministries, NGOs, private sector, academia. And the welcome we got was overwhelming. So now everyone sees our role, and even more, people are extremely happy that we are coordinating the Danish data reporting for the SDGs. They are so happy that they don't have to work with the administrative side of the system. Of course, they have to fill the 20-page long questionnaires, but this is how it is. Oh, sorry.
Yo tengo más una pregunta o una sugerencia, no sé, dado el objetivo de este evento. La presentación me pareció muy interesante y engloba un montón de cosas que nosotros aquí en Costa Rica hemos tratado de trabajar en eso. Yo creo que esto es muy lento y vamos muy lento, digamos que es normal, pero ¿qué posibilidades hay dentro de la hoja de ruta que venimos supuestamente a hacer en estos 2 días, o a plantear puntos básicos sobre la hoja de ruta? ¿Qué posibilidad hay de una asesoría de parte digamos, de la Oficina de Dinamarca a Costa Rica en términos de apoyar esta iniciativa de los registros administrativos? ¿Ya? ¿Qué posibilidad hay? Porque nosotros no estamos dentro de los países como, hay 3 o 4 niveles, yo no sé cuántos, y nosotros no estamos en un nivel, digamos, muy de abajo, sino más bien estamos muy de arriba. Yo no sé por qué, pero así estamos catalogados. Y entonces es difícil posiblemente, digamos, que alguna agencia le dé dinero al gobierno de Dinamarca para traer a alguno de ustedes por acá. Entonces yo no sé qué posibilidades hay dentro de la hoja de ruta que estamos haciendo, que vamos a hacer, la posibilidad de incluir ya de una vez ese punto como uno de los de la hoja de ruta, y tal vez la pregunta va no dirigida a usted, sino más bien a los coordinadores de este evento. ¿Ya? Muchas gracias.
Well, thank you. First, the middle part of your question was more addressed to Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I cannot take this one. Then, yes, there is a possibility, but there are also some constraints, and this can be said financial constraints. And if you can find a way, we would be happy to assist. And of course, then further specification, we need to talk whether you want like overall contributions or some more targeted contribution. What is the priority? Is it like population? Is it business? Or is it environmental data? As you know, the high-level group for cooperation, coordination, and capacity building is thinking about how to implement the Cape Town Global Action Plan. And there was a questionnaire conducted by high-level group and Paris 21 in December. And then some cross-cutting capacity building needs were identified. So it depends on the approach. You can take it national, demand-driven Costa Rican approach, or put it into the bigger system of Cape Town Global Action Plan. We would be happy to help, but we have to clarify on how do we go forward. Thank you. Last question. Spanish or English?
Se mencionó en la presentación que uno de los aspectos importantes a considerar en las estadísticas basadas en registros es una legislación apropiada. ¿Qué consideraciones tienen ustedes en su legislación para haber podido conformar el sistema de información basada en registros administrativos?
Good question. I will start with anecdote. Was it Colombian or was it Costa Rican statistical act that was adopted in 94 or 98? Yes, there was a slide about it yesterday. Well, our legislation was adopted in 68. Though it gave opening for us to have access to data from public authorities, and then some more legislative issues making it possible for us to access business data. Now, Statistics Denmark, together with our ministry, mainly Statistics Denmark, has drafted new legislation proposal which will be called Act on Danish Statistics. This one will be adopted in September or October this year. And then we try to expand our access. We succeeded actually in a limited way. We still have the same access. What we wanted to do is to expand it to have more access to business data and to big data. And this was rejected by the politicians. So this is the situation we fight with. Okay, I think we have to finish. I would be happy. One more? Okay.
Thank you. So I just wanted to comment on your question because I think that's what we want to be able to do today. I think what that's done is identified one priority as part of the roadmap process to then follow up and see what we can do in that space. And then just to follow up with one question, also going back to the timeline that's required in order to be able to create this type of a system, I think being able to think about these different registries, there's a question around interoperability with those registries. And now thinking about interoperability around data and registry systems, it's becoming easier to do that. And so do you think that based on where we are today compared to where you started and what that requires then for the timeline and the costs associated with creating a more modern system, that it can be done in a much more efficient, cost-effective way when it's really thinking about how you get different systems to also be more interoperable around the unique identifiers and how you connect data to that?
I hope I understood your question correctly, otherwise we take it up. I am a very simple person, and I must say every time I hear all the fast words, interoperability, open data, I'm thinking, what is it actually? Is interoperability the same format of the data? Is it CSV file? If this is so yes, absolutely. You can now exchange the data in a very good way by using the same formats, which is interoperable. Then you also have discussion of SDMX system, which is also like perfect system to transfer data from one institution to another. I'm not an expert in SDMX. What I would like just to say, it's just take a step back and think. As far as I know, SDMX exchange requires clear definitions of what you want to take. And this is probably ambitious on the global scale. But interoperability, timelines, in my opinion, it can be done in a much more quicker way than we did. And then we could also ask Omar, which is in starting the process, what are their expectations? Is it 50 years so that you are finished in 2053? Or do you expect to press the process a little? Was it? Okay, I think in order to maintain good friendship footing with my colleagues, I will leave. If you have any questions, just talk to me whenever possible. Thank you.